being taken over by organisations teaching controversial anti-racism theories. This is according to a report published yesterday. Now, in some classrooms, pupils are taking part in tests to check their unconscious bias. This is according to a campaign group called Don't Divide Us. Now, apparently in the surveys, children are asked if they understand the term white privilege and what they would do if a teacher mispronounces the name of a Middle Eastern student. The report written by Don't Divide Us has some strong warnings in it, and joining me now is Alka Sehgal Cuthbert, who is director of the organisation. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning, David.
It's a really interesting report, this. Do you want to just outline the main findings of it?
Yes, sure. Well, we found, from our sample, that there was only, did a sample of 49 third-party organisations who are mainly companies. Most of them are companies, some of them operating with, a fair few of them operating with budgets of over £1 million. And they are offering anti-racist provision to schools, and that could range from lesson content to teacher training, reading lists, directories of personnel, and so forth. So they, are operating, at more than one level in classrooms. Mm-hmm. And they, I think all but one of them subscribe or endorse ideas that come from critical race theory, even though they might not label themselves as critical race theory. So those are ideas that we're now familiar with, as you mentioned: white privilege, Britain is systematically racist, black people need white people to make space for them if they're to succeed. So we think that's pretty appalling. I mean, that in itself is pretty appalling. That's number one thing. The second thing is that there's absolutely no accountability. The DfE knows nothing about them. Parents, it's very hard for parents to find out about them. All the professional organisations that should be, if you like, acting as responsible gatekeepers for what goes into the school curriculum, none of them seem to know, or they're ignoring it, or they actively approve of it. So it's really quite astounding that these messages are being put in the school curriculum with absolutely no accountability.
So the question I have, doesn't this break the Education Act? Because I thought the whole point of the Education Act was to stop the promotion of partisan political views. These are clearly partisan views. Children are amazing sponges. They'll take on board what they're told. And I don't believe that children should be taught that we are intrinsically racist.
No, they shouldn't. I mean, essentially, if you shape the curriculum through the lens of this ideological lens, you will cut off children from their cultural inheritance. And that is all children, not just white children, but British citizens who happen to be non-white as well. As to the impartiality, yes, it is definitely breaching those sections of the Education Act that call for impartiality. However, unfortunately, we also have the Equality Act, which is being used either intentionally or maybe unintentionally in ways that really bring it up against the impartiality clause in the Education Act. And no one yet has taken the time or doing the work to find out where the contradictions are and coming to a judgment as to what should take priority.
Well, I think parents will be absolutely horrified to hear what's going on. This reminds me about sex education, something I feel very passionate about. We heard all these stories about parents trying to understand exactly what on earth their children were being taught. We've heard about the schools bringing in external providers. And I think this whole point about accountability is key. Parents should absolutely have the right to know what their children are being taught.
Well, absolutely. But I mean, the question of transparency of materials for parents is key, but so also is the question of adult responsibility to provide an education and not indoctrination. It is not the job of schools to provide activists, and yet through going along with these ideas, that is what some educators and some schools think they should be doing. This is extraordinary. It's a real abdication of education.
And just in terms of your report, what are you calling for as a result of what you found?
Well, in the short term, we think there really needs to be a strong the government, any government of whatever party, needs to get their act together and come up with a strong commitment to education, and to make the commitment to impartiality mandatory. Instruct Ofsted to include it as a key criterion in their inspections. And in the longer term, there really needs to be a kind of more considered deliberation in conjunction with relevant scholarly experts and the public and wider organisations involved in schooling to sort out exactly what should and shouldn't be in the curriculum.
Well said, Alka. Thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. That's Alka Sehgal Cuthbert, Director of Don't Divide Us. What do you make of that? I mean, my personal feeling is children don't see colour, actually. Children only see what they're indoctrinated with, and this concerns me deeply.
As you say, it's quite easy to draw parallels between this and the religious sex education that is obviously causing a lot of issues in terms of what children are taught about their gender identity and about sexuality. And I think at the heart of this, it is about making sure that parents have oversight of what children are being taught in schools, because these are issues that parents may not necessarily agree with. As you say, they are very politically ideological. They are they shouldn't be taught as fact. I'm okay with these things being taught in some way, but it should be
in a questioning manner.
Here is a point of view that some people have. What do you think about that? At an age-appropriate time, I think that's absolutely a discussion that could be had in schools. But teaching that you have white privilege is not necessarily a thing. So
this is where it's all got very blurred, because it's now being taught as that this is fact, as you rightly say, that we now know that everyone who is white has white privilege. That's simply not true.
And very much that's an opinion. And I'm fine with it being taught as an opinion at an age-appropriate time. Some people have this view, if you're talking about race in Britain or any sort of relevant topic, bring it up in the classroom, have a chat, see what the kids think about it. But don't present it as, you are privileged and here's what you need to do to rectify that.
Do you not have worries about schools bringing in external agencies? I think often it's sort of offloaded onto external agencies with very little oversight, because I think the schools also obviously are overwhelmed by what they have to do, but at the same time they entrust everything to the external organisation, and maybe that's not the right way to go about this.
I think it depends on the type of school and how they manage their curriculum. Some schools have quite a lot of control over their curriculum because it's what the parents and the teachers want to be able to make those choices. And I think, bringing in external organisations that have specialties is actually quite enriching to a lot of subjects and helps a lot of teachers where they're not necessarily the expert themselves to bring in an organisation.
But also parents should be able to see what they're teaching.
This is why parental transparency is key, so that parents can sense check what's going on and that they understand what their children are being taught, and if they have concerns about external materials that are being brought into the classroom, that they're able to raise that with the school, and that some sort of discussion between the parents, the teachers and the school is had.
Yeah, I agree. I think ultimately this is all about safeguarding, because when you entrust your child to a school, you hope they're going to be safe, and that doesn't mean just physically safe, but also safe mentally, spiritually, psychologically, and I think that's really, really important indeed. Thank you very much indeed for the moment, Emma. It's time for a break now. After the break, we'll be talking more about the BBC. This story gets murkier, more allegations, more developments. We'll discuss that after this break. This is TalkTV.